Welcome to another episode of the Love and Reality Podcast. I am your host, Ricky Valero. On today's episode, we are going to continue our trek through the Traitors Season 3. We are now into episode 7 of the Traitors. We're over the halfway point, maybe about 70% into the season. We only have a few episodes left with a whole lot of Traitors, a whole lot of people left still on the show with very, very minimal time left on the show. But this episode was crazy, wild, impactful, and frankly, I have a lot to say about this episode. But as always, I am joined by my fellow faithful in podcast world, Mr. Matthew Fox. How are you, sir?
Doing pretty good. You know, we wondered what the strategy was going to be and how they were going to spin things going forward. Turns out there was no strategy.
Yeah. On this podcast, if you listened to us last week, we broke down what Rob should have done on this show. Right. And before we jump in, folks, thank you guys so much for tuning in to another episode of the Love and Reality Podcast. If you're watching here on podcast platforms, please do us a favor, or listening on the podcast platforms, please do us a favor, leave a 5-star review, comment that you love us or you don't, whether either way, just leave 5 stars and then tell us how much you hate us. Either way, just make sure it's 5 stars. If you're watching here on the YouTube channel, do me a favor, like it, comment it, subscribe to the channel. We greatly appreciate it. All right. Let's dive into Season 3, Episode 7 of The Traitors. We're picking up right where we left off, right? We have a conversation happening between Caroline, Rob, and Danielle. Who are they going to murder? Are they going to murder themselves? Are we going to kill each other? Who knows? But really, the dynamic here was this. We said at the end of the show last week, whatever Rob does, you can't kill Derek. Whatever Rob does, you can't kill Derek. And it seemed like they were shutting down everybody. Dylan was off the table, which I will say this. Rob bringing up Dylan was his best idea while they were in the pulpit. I just wish that he would have pushed a little bit more because I think he could have convinced Caroline to kill Dylan a little bit easier than the emotional breakdown we see from Danielle for killing Derek. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, and what's a little frustrating, we've seen Rob before and all the talk about being like a master game player, and I hadn't really felt that in some of the curious decisions, and it really came home. We leave that initial turret not knowing if they managed to agree on anything because they basically said they couldn't figure it out, and then you're at the breakfast and it comes down to Rob, Dylan, and Derek being the last 3 people. And when you see Rob and Dylan walk through, you're like, my word, this is the antithesis of what you should be doing if you want to throw. And I know he's afraid Derek's going to come after him at the table, but once they pull the trigger and kill him, and you start seeing at breakfast that he obviously decided his strategy was going to be that the traitors were doing everything to just frame him so that he'd get taken out at banishment.
And there's only so many times that's going to continue to, the rhetoric is going to continue to be that way until it's like, all right, guys, let's go ahead. And I think that's what led to the finale here is like, all right, let's just banish him almost basically to, if he's not, then we fucked up. But this just kind of closes the chapter of what we're fighting for is almost what this episode felt like, because I honestly don't believe that any people in this entire show know who the hell else is a traitor now. I fully, wholeheartedly believe that first off, this is some of the worst group of faithfuls I've ever seen in the only the 3 years I'm watching this, but I'm going to make Matthew Fox go back in time and maybe rewatch the first 2 seasons of this. Like last season, I thought was pretty great. Dylan was very, very good early on, and then he's kind of fizzled off because he couldn't sniff the traitor out from his, being next to him.
The bro glasses got in the way.
They did. So obviously we see Derek doesn't make it through the thing. And agree, we both agree from the beginning. This was a terrible gameplay here. Danielle brings the waterworks, which is extremely weird, I guess you could say, because like they don't have like a they haven't had quite a history on the show together. You know what I mean? Sure, they both come from the Big Brother world or whatever, but there's a few people that kind of question her waterworks. But this is where Tom comes in that he's beginning to question that everyone that goes after Rob has been murdered. And then I wrote down, even a broken clock is right twice a day. Uh,
Well, so I think Rob made two huge goofs here. First of all, I mean, he was banging the drum. He would not give up Derek. He basically told them, if we're going to salvage our alliance as traitors, you got to give me this. So they do, and honestly, for them, for Carolyn and Danielle, they should have been thinking, this is the worst move for Rob. Let's give it to him. But then, if he wanted to have their support and them helping play the game, he has continuously gone after anyone that shows alliance with Danielle. So Danielle finally patches things up with Brittany. They're going along good. They seem to be in a great place. And Rob's like, "No, she's the one we're going to go after tonight." That was never going to work. You tried to force her into going after Bob. She didn't like that. She told you she didn't feel good about turning on a friend in Derek. You forced that down her throat. Now you're going again for Brittany, and also Carolyn didn't want to go for Brittany. So you're trying to just impose your will, and they had enough. And I thought that was another just tactical blunder.
yeah, because if you think about this as this, his goal should have been, I need to put somebody else on the limelight, right? I need somebody else because Wes is gone. Derek's really never been sniffed as a traitor. So I need somebody else to be, when I get to this round table, I need to pin this on somebody else that actually is obvious. So Dylan's idea of bringing up I Brittany, because that was one of the last names that
He
Derek said to
also
him.
fell short because when he's telling this to Rob, he talks about the fact that Brittany and Derek got in a shouting match that last
Mhm,
night. We never see it come up at the round table in the cuts that they gave us,
mhm.
which to me, that was probably the most convincing evidence, which kind of gives you that Dylan's heart wasn't in going after either of them.
And Sierra comment that said questioning Danielle's tears. She's like, Derek didn't really die. I almost spit out my water everywhere. I almost laughed. I could not help myself. Um, all right, moving on to probably the best competition so far of the season, which I found hilarious. So basically they could add $27,000 to the pot. Each pair will go head to head to protect themselves from murder. Three pairs will be victorious, and and then of course the three losers will be up for that murder here. Um, so we had Tom and Dylan, which I think is honestly, I'd probably watch these two on a reality TV show just together because they were pretty funny together here. They took on Sam and Ivar. Sierra and Rob took on Dolores and Chriselle. Danielle and Brittany took on Gabby and Caroline. They had to hold each other's hands inside a box. And then, of course, they were pouring all sorts of creatures inside the box and then on top of them and then around them and all of these things. And to be honest with you, this was hilarious. The entire thing was funny. I mean, but my favorite part is 5 seconds into the competition, maybe it was 15 seconds, but Chriselle, the moment they poured the first creatures in the box, she pulled her fucking hand out. And Dolores was furious, absolutely furious. Everybody basically from there stood the test of time, and they had to do a sudden death where they had to climb into this, or not climb in, their hands into the same box and find a ring. And yeah, I mean, this entire thing, there was some funny one-liners from some of the ladies that, like, hey, this guy's, these creatures are touching second base without even,
That
buying
was
dinner.
Brittany.
Yeah, Brittany was hilarious. This was the first time that I actually had fun with the cast, where it was kind of they showed some like personality outside. Yeah, sure, this is a game, but at the same time, like this was the first time we really see them have some fun together. Tom was super fun here. Dylan and Tom back and forth were great. Tom, I felt like kind of got lucky a little bit because he had the little hat on, so like everything would pour into there first. So I felt like he had a little bit of an advantage with that. But I really enjoyed this entire scene, and when it came down to it, Sierra, Rob, Danielle, Brittany, and Tom and no,
No,
Sam
it
and
was
Ivar. Sam
Iva,
and
Sam and
Ivar
Iva.
ended up with um,
Shields.
with Shield here. I enjoyed this entire moment. What about you, man?
It was the grossest challenge that they've had.
Yeah, by far.
It was deeply unsettling for those people, but it was fascinating. I was surprised all five of the other groups made it all the way to the end.
I will say this: I want if you win the competition, I believe you should be safe from the round table too. I'm just going to throw that out there. I think there should be some sort of like extra because the traders are never protected at the round table. And I
Mm.
feel like they should kind of be a little bit more protected because maybe not, because they're the traders or whatever. But I think if a trader is able to play the game like anybody else, that safety should mean some sort of safety for them at the round table too, because what prevents them from being, I mean, I know they're being the quote unquote hunted here, but whatever.
Yeah, but if you're gonna do that, then you can't have half the group.
No, for sure. No, because you can end up having like three traders be safe or whatever. But I mean, I think maybe if like I think like every competition should only result into like two shields anyway, right? You know what I mean?
Yeah,
I feel like
and that
something like
might
that.
that might make more sense. Unlike like the first competition that they did, everybody that made it in, I think there was only 6 people
Yeah.
that were available for murder, and 2 of them were traitors. It's like this is a complete.
Yeah, and I agree with that point. Like I think that, but I just feel like to me, I just feel like there's part of it that they should 100% have some sort of dynamic where you're you're not able to like you get some sort of safety too. I just feel like that should be in the mix somehow. All right, so blah 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 blah. You know, Rob's name's being brought up. Rob, and then like as Matt mentioned, he's pitching Brittany's name to everybody, and nobody's really going gun ho for that. We get to the round table. I will say this. It was kind of it was kind of uneventful. I really feel like at the end of the day, the Rob set himself up. He was banished. I felt like from the moment we sat at this round table, he did nothing to bring somebody to the table that was going to be a vying for an option to be outside of him. The his time had come. It was time for him to go. It was time for them to take the risk and say, as I said at the beginning of the episode, you sat at the round table and you're like, look, the only person that makes any logical sense to vote for right now is Rob. So what I'm going to do is we're going to get Rob out of here. And if he's a faithful, hell, we did the trader's job, quote unquote, as Rob has said time and time again. But if he's a traitor, then hell, we knocked out a traitor, right? So to me, this was, I'm not going to go through the voting process. Not really going to go completely over the round table because I thought it was kind of uneventful. This was
Wow.
Rob eliminating Rob, really. You know what I mean? Do you feel the same there?
I just think he backed himself
Yep.
into a corner, and yeah, I mean, I don't know where he thought he was going to keep going. Maybe his last thing was just I'll eliminate all the best strategy players I can think of and see how this game spins out of control to the end, um, which is fairly accurate. I know some of these people fancy themselves as good strategists, but I don't know that we have any great strategists left. But he kind of, we talked about all the ways you could, after surviving that roundtable from episode 6, have maybe spun some people off your scent, and he never did.
No, and that's everything that led to his downfall in this episode. And um Dylan, obviously voted for Gabby here. He said, I don't think it's either of them, so they need to look in other directions, which I thought was hilarious.
Although
Dylan
he has
was,
voted for Gabby a couple of times.
yeah.
He thought she was potentially a traitor a couple of weeks ago, so
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so he kept, yeah, so he's sniffing in the wrong direction anyway, which I think that's the reason why you got to keep him now. If I'm the traders, like if you're paying attention as Danielle and Caroline, which I don't know if they really are because they've been so caught up in fighting with one another that there's little small things where Dylan used to be a strong player, and I don't think he's as strong as he once was. And I don't blame him for not seeing Rob as a traitor. I feel like even part of him felt like he was a traitor, but he even says like, I think Rob was protecting me. You know what I mean? And
yeah.
because of that, he felt there's a sense of safety. It's like in the back of Dylan's head, it's almost like I feel like he knew that Rob was a traitor, but he didn't dive into it too deep because he's like, look, he's in my back pocket. I'm sure we'll eliminate him at some point, maybe when it comes down to the nitty gritty. And Rob was protective of Dylan. You know what I mean? Like this was the first time he had ever mentioned his name in the pulpit. And, but outside of that, he was very pro Batman and Robin here. But obviously Danielle and Caroline are elated in the pulpit. Danielle said, I got you. And then Caroline was like, not before Brittany, you don't. And I was like, golly, these two can continue to not trust one another, which, I mean, Caroline shouldn't trust her. Danielle's been trying to actively throw her under the bus for weeks. And then, of course, we find out they have to murder someone face to face. Of the 5 people that can be murdered, we have Chriselle, Dolores, Dylan, Tom, and Gabby. We have like this weird scene where each one of the faithfuls kind of plead to the traitors to keep them. I don't know if they were talking to them or not, or just talking to the wall. But yeah, Tom said if he dies tonight, he will be a happy man because Tom, throughout this entire journey, has taken the credit for Rob being eliminated, even though it's kind of served him on a silver platter. I do love seeing Tom be quirky, weird, and stupid, so I'm not really mad at that. Your thoughts on the pulpit and maybe your thoughts on who you would potentially send home.
Yeah, I still think I would probably. I'm leaning toward I would take out Dolores. Um, just then it'll have people wondering maybe about Tom, because Dolores, Chriselle, the ones that went against him. I probably wouldn't take out Tom or Dylan because they're kind of wild on theories, and I think Carolyn's going to put her foot down about Gabby because a lot of what she was taught, they were partners in that competition. I don't think she wants to do that, and Gabby has not had a lot of great theories either. So, Dolores seems like she's getting a little closer to figuring some of these things out, and that would probably leave them trying to figure out who did it. It might even make Chriselle even more anti-Tom, and start getting something, because you got to try to be throwing. Because the other thing you got to be thinking about and looking at here is now that Rob, a fairly obvious target, is gone, maybe people come back around to thinking it was Brittany, but probably not. Who are you going to try to get them to be suspecting? And you're going to have to generate it somewhere. There isn't a lot. There aren't a lot of active theories out there going along right now.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. And we're down to 1, 2, 3, 4 episodes before the reunion, I think here.
I think
Yeah.
no one thinks it's Sam. No one really thinks it's Ivar. Do you bring back the Sierra survived the coffin once and was super tight with Rob? Maybe.
Yeah.
She's the only other one that voted with Rob for.
I think if she was
Brittany.
available for Ben, I think if she was available to be eliminated, to be murdered, she would 100% be on the radar.
I wouldn't have murdered her because I think you've got to be thinking ahead. It's not just about who you're going to murder. It's who are you leaving that you can then make as a good banishment target. So Sierra
Absolutely.
might be one of the best banishment targets left.
Yeah.
That's why, sure. I would probably punch the ticket for either Dolores or Chriselle. And
yeah, because you
make it look like Tom had some animus.
Yeah, I'm on the same boat there. I think Dolores has to go. I feel like Dolores is probably the smartest of everybody, as you said, smartest of everybody left. And I feel like she's been a little, like, not fully, right? She's been on the tail of a few people. I think she's the best game player left, right? You know what I mean? I think Danielle and Caroline have been awful. Brittany hasn't been very good. Yeah, I mean, Dylan was good early, but he's all over the place now. But yeah, I mean, looking at next week, I didn't watch the trailer for next week's episode, but looking at the synopsis, the faithful seek to close the lid on the coffin theory. An alliance of gamers sparks suspicion, is what the trailer for the synopsis for next week's episode is. So,
yeah. So I mean, maybe you try to push towards Sierra for the round table because, like I said, she's the only one that voted with Rob and seemed to be aligned with Rob, and people had that coffin theory. She's the only one left now, so.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, folks, let us know who you think will be murdered on next week's episode of The Traitors. We appreciate you guys' continued support of the Love and Reality podcast as we dive through the world of Vanderpump Rules. We're getting to know Tom from the beginning, which has been a fun journey with his fun quotes. It's nice to see that over 10 years later, the quotes are still coming. But we appreciate you guys so much for tuning into the Love and Reality podcast. And we'll be back next week breaking down The Traitors, breaking down Vanderpump Rules. And then, of course, Love is Blind is right around the corner. For those of you that watch the show, we'll be covering it here on the Love and Reality podcast. Thank you guys so much. We'll talk to you guys next week.